Hi everyone, welcome back. Welcome to the Coding Zoo. If this is your first time joining, my name is Shane and this is the CSS Building Block series. In today's lesson we are going to cover different types of CSS selectors. In a previous lesson we covered the basic selector, how to select using a class selector, how to select using like an element or type selector, or a name ID selector. We're going to go deeper into using combination of those selectors, using combinators. So I hope that interests you. If so, stick around. We're going to jump right in. Alright, so hey, if you check out my desktop here, I've got this index.html page already created for us. It's got my doc type, it's got my HTML tag, my header, my body. I've got a header, and I've got a main section, and I've got a couple of articles here. I went ahead and prepared this for us so we can go ahead and get through the lesson a little bit quicker. We're going to be using CSS to format different items on this page. You do that by including a style sheet and using CSS selectors and providing properties for those selectors. So if you look here at the top, if you're not familiar, I'm including a style sheet right here. That style sheet is this file right here, and I've already added a few basic selectors. So here is a selector that basically is an element or type selector, and I'm selecting the HTML element and the body element, and I'm setting the margin and padding. Here's another one here where I'm selecting the main and the article element. Again, it's a multiple element selector. It's basically a type selector, and I'm setting the margin to 10 pixels. And here's where I'm selecting a single type, the header element, and I'm setting the background color to blue. So I went ahead and set this up with basic selectors. If you're not familiar with these basic selectors here, that and including the name selector, ID selector, or the class selector, check out one of my previous lessons. It's in the CSS building blocks. We cover that. I'll put a link below to that video. All right, so I have my basic index page. I got my basic styles.css page. Let's go ahead and check out what this page looks like at the very beginning. Here's my main header at the top here. I have this unordered list at the top here. Think of it as like a menu. It's got main, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, or rather main, page 2, page 3, page 4. I've got a title. I've got one section here. It's got my favorite authors. I've got another unordered list. And here are a couple of different paragraphs. And here is another article with a title and another unordered list. I'm going to show you how we can manipulate some of these elements and change them up. So, all right, so let's go ahead and start with the menu. Here's the menu list right here. Here's my navigation element, and here's the unordered list that would make up that navigation, that menu. If you go back and look at it, it looks kind of weird. It's just a regular list here. It doesn't look like your common menu. Let's go ahead and fix that up. So in order to do that, I can select these elements different ways. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways of doing that. So the first example I'm going to give you is basically a child selector. A child selector is a way to select the children of a given element, and it would be the immediate children, be the children that are right underneath it. Give you an example. I'm going to build a selector that would select the UL tag under nav, and it would select the child element LI under UL. UL is a child of nav, and LI is a child of UL. So let's write that up real quick. Okay, so I'm going to do nav to select that type nav, and I'm going to select a nav that I'm going to select that unordered list underneath that nav. So this greater than sign is a way to say I want to do a child selector. I'm going to select a child that's immediately beneath whatever element you're specifying, whatever type you're specifying. So I'm going to select the LI tag underneath that. Put my two brackets, and now I'm going to add a little style to those tags. want to put a padding of 3 pixels. I'll put a color of white, and let's do a width of 100 pixels. How about a margin of 0 pixels? And let's do display. Let's do inline block. Okay, and let's change the background color. How about blue? All right, press Control S to save. So I've done a child selector. I'm selecting the child of nav, this UL child of nav, and I'm selecting the LI child, or line item child of this unordered list. I saved it. Let's go over here and click refresh. This is what I'm trying to select. Refresh. There we go. So I was able to select those line items and style them to white, and I made them inline blocks so they now are side by side. So that's one way of selecting those particular elements. That's called, again, a child selector. I'm basically selecting the immediate child of something. Another way of doing that same thing is to have a descendant selector. It's a little bit shorter hand than what I just did. Let's go ahead and change that child selector to a descendant selector. So keep in mind, a child selector, you're specifying a whole path down to a given element. So that will help you narrow down to exactly what you want. So what if there were multiple navs on this page and it had multiple childs, right? Well, you would pick the nav. This would allow you to specify the nav that has the unordered list, that has the line item. It gives you kind of an exact path to what you're trying to do. And of course, in some cases, you would just use a class selector or an ID selector and do these things. But sometimes you have to actually do it this way and use a child selector. There's different use cases, right? Different use cases require different ways of doing this. I'm going to change this to a descendants selector. So that was a child selector. Let's comment this out. So we keep the code on thecodingzoo.com for you to download and study, play around with. And I'm going to create a descendants selector. I'm going to cut and paste some of this. All right, so I want to choose nav again, and instead of selecting 2 child levels down, I'm just going to say, I want you to select all the line item descendants underneath nav. So this is a descendant selector. I can skip a level. I'm looking for all of the LI items under nav, and it doesn't matter if there are multiple unordered list or ordered list. It's going to find all the line items no matter how deep they are. That's the difference in descendant selector and child selector. So if I have a child, I have a child, her name's Jai or Gabrielle. She's sitting right over here at the Coding Zoo. I'm selecting my daughter here. But she's also a descendant. But you know, I could be a grandparent. That grandparent and the grandchild, that grandchild is not my child. She's a descendant, right? So descendants is kind of further down. It allows you to select all the way down this tree, this family tree of elements, right? So that's the difference in descendants and child selectors. So I'm going to save this, and I should be able to click refresh and see that it looks the same. I'm going to change it to red just so we can see the difference. I'll probably change it back. Yeah, see how it changed it to red. All right, so let's change that back. So that's a better way than the child selector in this case. In some cases, you might need to use a child selector for whatever reason. This is a descendants selector. Pretty simple, pretty easy. I just specify the first element, and then I specify whatever element I'm looking for that's inside of that first element. With the child selector, I use a greater than sign. That means the immediate child, not the descendants. All right, let's move on. All right, so I didn't really like the way this padding looked here at the top. Let's real quickly, or rather margin, let's really quickly add another descendants selector. So I'm going to select the unordered list underneath nav, and I'm going to add a margin of 0 pixels, save it, refresh, and made that bounce to the top there. All right, let's cover another one. It's called a pseudo class selector. A pseudo class selector is basically a keyword that's added to a selector that specifies a special state of the selected element. So I'm doing an element selector, and I'm adding this keyword that specifies a particular state that selector might be in. For example, if you're hovering over something, that element is in a hover state. If you clicked on something, then the element is in an active state. There's different types of pseudo classes. Let's go ahead and try that out. So I want to basically change the style of this menu when I hover over it. So I'm going to use a pseudo class selector. So I'm going to do nav, select the element nav, and I want to select the child descendant line items of nav, and I want to say that when they are hovered, that their style, when they're in the hover state, their style will be changed to, let's do a different background color, and let's do orchid, and let's make the text a different color too. So let's do black. So this is a pseudo class selector. It's using a element Descendant Selector, and it's adding the pseudo class of hover. I'm going to save it, click refresh, and refreshed it. You don't see a difference, but as you hover over it, you'll notice that the text turns black and it turns into this orchid color for the background. You can hover over each of these. So when I hover over it, this element goes into a state that's called hover, and a new style is applied. That is a pseudo class selector. Pretty neat stuff. Okay, I want to show you how to combine an element descendant selector with an ID selector. So I want to choose, let's go ahead over here. I want to choose the main element and the paragraphs in the main element, but I don't want all the paragraphs. I want the paragraphs that have an ID. Pound is for a name or ID selector. ID of intro, so INTRO, and I want to put a different style on that. So I'm going to put a font style of italic. All right, so I'm saying find me the main element type. I'm saying find me the paragraphs underneath there, but only the one that has an ID of intro. So I'm combining these different combination of selectors. I'm going to save that. If you look over here, I have a main, and there's a paragraph, and there's the keyword intro. Let's click refresh. There we go. So it turned it italics. I was able to find that exact one. Now if I go back over to here and add another paragraph and put some lorem ipsum type test in there, you'll notice it will not turn that into italics. It's plain font style. It's a plain font style. All right. So that is a neat combination. Just wanted to show you can do different combinations of these different types of selectors. I provided an element or type selector. It actually chose descendant, and it used an ID selector as part of it also. Let's move on to the next one. So I want to show you you can actually go down to the attribute level. You can go down and choose something based upon what attribute value it has. So here's basically an attribute selector. So I'm going to select the LI element, and I want to style the one that has an attribute title that is equal to the word easiest. So I'm going to color it red. So I'm selecting the LI tag, but only the one that has a title attribute that equals easiest. So save that, go back to here. You'll see that right down here that has the title attribute and it has the value of easiest. And I'm going to put title here also equals just so you'll know that it's selecting them on multiple ones that have titles, but only one has that particular text we're looking for. Save that. Click refresh, and there we go. It only colored the JavaScript the color we told it to color. So that's selecting based upon an attribute's value of a given element. Let's move to the next one. That one's pretty neat. So there's just different ways. It gets really complicated, but it's very easy to use once you understand the syntax. But I'm just trying to say you can use very complicated search type combinations here. Let's go back to styles. Now this one's going to be a little bit different. I want to do what's called a sibling selector. So this is going to be what's called an adjacent sibling selector. It's going to select the sibling to an item. A sibling is basically, think brother or sister, right? So it's the one that's right next to it. It's not below it. It's not a child, but it's like right next to it. So this li tag here, it has a sibling. Its sibling is this li tag right here, and this li tag right here. Now this ul tag, its sibling would not be the li tag. The li tag would be a child. The ul tag would have a sibling of h2, right? That would be its sibling. So you kind of get the gist. A sibling is the elements at the same level of whatever element you're starting with. I want to find basically this element right here. Now I want to get rid of this title. Let's assume this title isn't there. But let's say I want to color this Python a different color. Well, first I can find this sibling and say, give me the immediate sibling right after that. So that would be this one, Python. Now, since it's going to be an adjacent sibling selector, it won't color this Java one because I'm going to use an adjacent sibling selector that will color the one that's immediately next to that element, the sibling that's right next to it. Let's type that in and see how that works. So, all right, so I'm going to find the one that has the title. Here, let's cut and paste, save a little time there. Okay, so I'm finding that element. I'm going to do plus. Plus is the adjacent sibling selector syntax. So li. So I want to find the sibling that's right next to that li tag that has the title easiest. And I'm going to set the color to blue. Save it. So if we did this correctly, Python should be the only one that turns blue. There we go. So it found the adjacent sibling to the li tag that had the title easiest. So again, that's called an adjacent sibling. The plus sign lets you specify that. All right, so last but not least, let's go ahead and check out a regular sibling selector. Now, a regular sibling selector would find all the siblings at that level of the element that you originally find. So you find an element and it will find all of its siblings and apply a style to that. So I'm gonna comment this one out real quick. We're gonna use that same list. So this is an adjacent sibling using the plus. Let's do a regular sibling selector. And for that, I'm going to use this squiggly line here. I forget what that's called. I call it a squiggly line. I need to look that up one of these days. If you know what that's called, hey, leave us a comment below. Let us know. One of these days, I need to search that up. I call it the squiggly line. Okay, so we use the li tag element type. We use the li element selector. Find the one that has a title attribute that's equal to easiest. And we use the squiggly line, and I'm going to point to the li siblings that's a sibling to this one that has a title of easiest. And I'm going to apply a style of, let's do a color again. And instead of blue, like we did before, I'm going to turn them both yellow. So if this works correctly, it should find both of these, not just Python. It should find both of these as a sibling and turn them yellow. So click refresh, and there we go. Boy, that's ugly. It's an ugly color. Huh, let's try, let's try purple. Click refresh. So that's a regular sibling selector. We have an adjacent sibling selector that was above it. We used attribute selectors, child selectors, pseudo class selectors. We used child selectors in combination with an ID or name selector. We used descendant selectors. There's so many different ways of using selectors to find a given element and change its properties. So I just wanted to show you what are those different types and how you can put them together. And you can use these combinations, any of these combinations together to find what you're looking for. So those are the different ways you can actually select and find different elements in your document to specify CSS properties. Hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, if you'd like me to elaborate further on any one of these, let me know. Leave a comment below. I hope this was helpful to you. Hope you learned something. If you liked this video, please click like. If you disliked it, go ahead, smash that dislike button. But hey, leave us a comment. Let us know how we can improve it. Again, our goal is to help others learn how to program, and you can help us by giving us feedback on how to make that better. So we would appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed yet, click subscribe. We're going to be covering a lot more CSS items here in the near future. We also have the JavaScript and HTML playlist. Check them out. I hope to see you next time. Hope you have a great week. See ya.